Nebraska Preps Postgame with Damon Benning and Jacob Padilla.
You're the big boys, guys. Nebraska Preps Postgame with my man JP. Hopefully this won't be our swan song. It may. We'll have to figure out what to do.
Yeah, I think we've got some ideas that we're kicking around.
Right? We can't. I just can't be going through Jacob Padilla withdrawal. Right? Maybe we'll have it like NBA podcast and we'll talk college baseball.
Well, and we got a new basketball season getting ready to start here soon that we might
how about that?
take a look at. So
let's take a look at that. But a heck of a weekend, right? I guess it's a week now.
Yeah.
Right? You go Tuesday through Saturday. It seems like a marathon, and it didn't disappoint, right? I mean, it was a lot of surprises, some buzzer beaters, quality play. We saw some upsets. We saw guys getting able to play, right? The officiating was pretty good for the most part, I felt like, in the majority of the games. I apologize to any coaches that feel like maybe not so much, but
probably most of them.
Stylistically, I mean, there were some tough games to officiate. I mean, can you imagine, officiating Auburn and then turning around and having a Prep Bellevue West vantage point in that one, or the third quarter with Prep and Millard North? I mean, that's a completely different game, same sport.
Yeah, this tournament really had it all. You kind of hit on everything. It had everything. It had upsets. It had lower seeds winning state titles. It had game winners. It had buzzer beating tying shots, and it was just amazing to watch. And you look at the 5-day format, and I know it was a bit of a grind for those of us that did all 30 games throughout the week, but all the coaches that talked about it, they seemed to be in favor of it. They liked kind of having that day off in the middle of the tournament, whether it was after their first game or after their second, whatever. However, that kind of day off came. That I think a lot of the coaches kind of liked having that time to have their kids recharge and be able to look over some things and get ready for the semis and the finals.
So it's interesting. I was talking this morning and over the weekend. More difficult to do what Coach Weeks did as the favorite in C1 at Auburn, or what Coach Ribble did in B to pull off the upset after losing to Nebraska City in the sub-districts?
Yeah, that's probably what Beatrice did. I think Auburn, and they talked about this afterward, just kind of both players and coaches kind of compared the last three state titles and kind of what each season was like, and how that first one was such a surprise for them last
2 years
that got it started. And then last year it was expected, and they were the best team by far. They had the best roster, and they played like it all season, and they just finished it off. This year, I don't think the roster was quite as separate from everybody else, and we kind of saw that in the title game. But it was still
you had a Ryan, you had a Cam, and you had a Maverick.
Yeah. And then you had 3-4 weeks on the coaching staff, and a lot of family ties.
A lot of family ties.
But even you can see they didn't have a sick Daniel Frary was an absolute monster all tournament long and had a really great year. But last year they had Frary next to a Josh Lambert, 6'8", who went in and was getting buckets at Midland as a true freshman there for them at the varsity level. So and then obviously Cam doing what he does, and Ryan and C.J. Hughes, I think, was their other shooter. So
last year,
yeah, their roster was just absolutely stacked. They should have won. They did won. They took care of business. This year, it wasn't quite that much separation. Obviously, like you talked about, Maverick, freshman, playing all season long, and boy, did he step up in that game. But
yeah, what did he finish with? 14, I think he had.
He had 11.
11.
But 2 big threes. He had a 3-point play that was huge in the fourth quarter. He just, down the stretch of that third quarter heading into the fourth, he kind of took over when the game was really in doubt and gave them their lead, and they were able to kind of hold on to it and finish it out. So I don't think the separation was quite as much as it was the previous year, but I think they were still the best team, and they proved that. Beatrice, man, we talked about Class B all year long. We said we liked the top 5, and we thought it. And sure enough, number 6 comes and upsets the whole thing.
Yeah, so tapped everybody on the shoulder. The seedings are, especially after the first 2 days, Scott gets upset at the buzzer. Waverly gets beat by Beatrice the next day. Elkhorn finds a way to beat Norris, and 22-4 at one point. I know, like conventional wisdom, you're thinking, oh gosh, this set basketball back. But, Norris had some looks at it. The 1-3-1, I felt like Elkhorn defensively really bothered them.
Oh, they were. So I was at the EMC final when Norris picked apart that zone, absolutely handled them. They were dishing the ball all over the court, raining threes. It was one of the best offensive execution games that I've ever seen against a zone like that. And I didn't get to see their second time, but they won by 10, so they were still able to kind of control that game. And then you come to this game against Elkhorn, and they just had no idea what to do with it. And nobody could make a shot. There were turnovers all over the place. Elkhorn was really aggressive, all up in their faces. They were extending that zone. They were trapping. They were all over the place, and they were covering up better than they had previously. So credit to Elkhorn for finding a way to do things differently enough that what Norris had done previously wasn't going to work again. And then sometimes there's just a lid on that rim, and we saw that a lot throughout the state tournament. And that's something we see in that arena where guys maybe don't always shoot as well as they do normally. And Norris just couldn't find a way to get the ball through the rim.
Let me ask you something. From an official standpoint, would you rather be, have a game like, GICC, Central Catholic, and UTAN or Auburn, or even Elkhorn and Beatrice, or would you rather be a part of, like, let's say, the third quarter with Bellevue West and Millard North? There's a varying degree of difficulty in both kinds of games to let however styles are going to be played evolve.
Yeah, and I know you mentioned you praised the officiating in that third quarter specifically, and
just letting it go.
That was honestly the best 8 minutes of high school basketball I've seen. When you look at back and forth, 52 points between the two teams, both best players on both teams stepping up, going back and forth, bucket, and it wasn't all like they were difficult shots. Guys were just going and making plays. That was just an incredible 8 minutes of basketball, and like you said, the flow was a big part of that.
Yeah.
And there wasn't a lot of stoppages. And credit to the guys, they weren't they weren't making a lot of plays where the officials really had to, or giving the officials chances to kind of call something in the backcourt that would disrupt it or whatever. They were playing pretty solid on both ends and challenging without hacking and all that kind of stuff. So that was just a fun. I imagine it was fun to be a part of it, but like you said, that's tough. Like when you've got that level of athleticism and size out there to be in the right position to make the calls all the time. Credit to that crew for sure for keeping up.
Of what happened with the buzzer beaters in close games, and I even think you could make the case even UTAN had their chances, right? If they make some foul shots and some chippies down the stretch, that's maybe a different game. But when you look back at the state tournament in its totality, who do you think had the hardest time sleeping when it was all said and done?
I think probably Prep or Elkhorn, I would think. And
I'll let you finish, and I'll give you mine. Probably City's free throws. There were a couple of other things late.
They had about 5 different chances to win that game and couldn't quite make the play to do it. And it's the same thing that happened to them against Bellevue West in the regular season, where they had that game won. Chucky comes out of nowhere and leads them back, and Prep wasn't able to make 1 or 2 more plays to finish it off. And it goes to overtime, and then Bellevue West pulls it out there. This time it took 3 overtimes, but same story, same ending.
If you're Elkhorn, that's my choice.
Yeah. And
do you foul and not allow Beatrice to get the 3-pointer off? And Caden Glenn, who looks like he's been here before, right? Very savvy and poised, calmly knocks down a 3 at the buzzer, and all of a sudden you're thinking that may be tough for Elkhorn to overcome emotionally.
And I talked to Coach Benji yesterday, and it's. He's gonna be thinking about that one for a long time, and I'm sure the players involved will too. They had the lead, you have the ball, turnover, go down.
Yep. Very uncharacteristic too.
Yeah, and just feel bad for those guys. They had it won, and then on the last play there, the tying play, they expected Elkhorn to be in their 1-3-1, come out in the zone. They played it the entire game. They drew up a play for the zone. Elkhorn came out in a man. Yep. And Clark Ribble just trusted his guys. All right, go make a play. And Elliot Juergens drove, had an antler kind of double on the ball for some reason. Made the right play, and Caden right in front of his bench buried it. So that, and like you mentioned, he's a guy that's been here before. Sophomore year with Johnson Brock, 25 points, game high in the state title game to lead Johnson Brock over Osmond in his last game as an Eagle before moving to Beatrice and making that transition. And now he gets to close out his high school career with another state title in a different class at another school. So heck of a career for him.
Do you feel like, is there a class where you're not sure, and maybe B's the easy answer, who the best team in the class is?
I forgot to finish the thought on the last one, though, but as for the fouling, Benji said, thought about it, but it's not something that they practice a lot, and he just thought so much could go wrong, especially when there's 20 seconds left. When there's less than that, where you feel like you can get it in.
Typically I like to think 5 seconds or less. I'm going to foul.
It's hard to time it right when there's that much time to think about it and for them to try to do something. And so it's tough.
And conversely, we saw Bellevue West execute almost a similar concept where they waited until it got under the time, and they did intentionally foul because they knew that, not intentionally as in 2+ the ball, but they waited out the scenario.
Yeah, foul at the right time. And so ultimately, I think that the question always comes down to, what are you comfortable with? What do you feel like your guys can execute? What do you practice? And I know as a coach last summer, or 2 summers ago actually, we were up 3. We missed free throw that could have put us up more or whatever. They got the ball, and instead of fouling, I told them not to foul. It's played out. Got it in, chucked it in from the opposite free throw line at the buzzer to send it to overtime. And we ended up losing in overtime.
No, that's tough. A lot of times when you see those kinds of shots go in, those teams that make the shots, a lot of times win in overtime.
And we were getting crushed on the glass, too. So what I was thinking was well, I don't want to give up a free throw and then an and one putback because they had some big kids bigger than we did. So it's that's kind of where you're thinking, too, is what's more likely, them throwing up a miracle shot or getting a putback off an intentionally missed free throw. And so there's a lot of things that you have to weigh in those brief 20 seconds or whatever as a coach that you have to make that decision. And it didn't work out for them, but that's kind of what they were comfortable with. So unfortunately for them, it didn't work, but credit to Beatrice for making the play.
When you look back at what happened in Class A with Bellevue West and Prep, and obviously Coach Lutke coaching in that game with a very heavy heart. Yeah. Probably the better game of the two, the Friday night, Saturday night, although the third quarter in the championship game was probably the best stretch of basketball. Is that kind of how you look at it?
Yeah, definitely. That's like I said, that's the highest level of play that I've seen. And the highs, I think, just in terms of the plays some of those guys made were higher in the Bellevue West Miller North game. But start to finish, the traded runs, the competitiveness, obviously took 12 extra minutes to decide the game. You factor in all that, I think I'd probably put that one narrowly ahead of the final. But I tweeted this. I think that was probably the best. Even the Millard North Millard West game was a good one.
It's a fantastic game.
Credit to Millard West for pushing Millard North as much as they did. Millard North had to hit free throws in the fourth quarter to hold Millard West off, and they did it. 14 for 16.
Reoccurring theme. Made free throws for Millard North in crunch time. They did not wilt, and for 2 reasons that's important. Number 1, you coughed up the huge lead a year ago. Number 2, your school is not rich in storied basketball success tradition, so it would be easy to check the rearview mirror and be thinking, you start short-arming that thing a little bit, and it just doesn't come off as clean or whatever. And Millard North, with all the pressure, if they don't win it this year, they'll never win it, and all this rhetoric out there, they answered the dinner bell.
And it was a consistent theme throughout the tournament. There were a lot of opportunities to seal games with free throws that teams weren't able to capitalize on. And Millard North, that's why that stood out so much to me for Millard North, that they were able to do it.
You look at Kearney Central Catholic. Oh, boy, would they like to have that one again against Wayne, right? Yeah. It's like they couldn't throw it in the ocean from the foul line, and you're thinking, what is going on with the free throw shooting? But staying right there, when is the last time you remember that many players, different players, playing pivotal roles at different phases of one really good basketball game?
Which game?
Millard North and Bellevue West.
Okay, yeah. And that's why that third quarter and the extension, the whole game was so fun, is because it wasn't Chucky and Hunter going back and forth. It was everybody.
They were almost at times plays. In addition to.
Yeah. So that's –
whether it was Fiddler, Stuvie, William Kyle defensively, I thought were outstanding. Josiah Dotzler with a couple of – didn't really shoot it well, but crafty defensively.
Made some plays in the fourth quarter again.
But then Millard North, on the other hand, Tyler Sandoval, who I thought was very, very good defensively.
Yeah.
Jason Green. Jason Green finally had the opportunity to show you what all the fuss is about, right? And they did it without Saint really scoring the basketball.
And that's the interesting thing. Like, you look at it, Chucky and Hunter, 25 apiece, led the way. Sure. But Millard North, so normally, like, St. Thomas and
would be next,
and Frankie Fiddler are kind of the other guys there. Frankie, 11 points on 3 of 8 shooting. Saint, 9 points on 2 of 7 shooting. They both did a little bit in addition to scoring, and Saint made some big plays, passing the ball. Frankie made
really high
plays.
IQ in crunch time.
Neither one of those guys were what you expected them to be. It was the other guy stepping up. It was Jaden Johnson coming out of nowhere with 24 points on 10 of 13 shooting. It was
this is strange, right? Because I like you. Listen, we both follow a lot of these kids, and especially since they've been younger and growing up, so it's easy to have feelings. Jaden Johnson might be the one guy that I've kind of rallied around that I didn't know really previous to the last 2.5 years, because he's so oft maligned. He has become kind of the, even in the summer, it's right. It's like, well, there's Vode, and he's always the guy that everybody's waiting to try and replace. And to see him flourish with some difficult shots on the biggest stage and take control from a leadership standpoint, oh man, I felt like it almost warmed my heart. Like I really cheer for him.
That shot at the end of the third quarter was one of the most ridiculous things I've seen. Yeah. Fading sideways, falling back, shooting back towards the rim, bottom of the net at the buzzer to give them the lead. Like, that was insane.
How about when he was going to shoot the three, then he didn't want to, then he shot it anyway because he was just getting space. I can't remember who I was sitting next to. I said, you almost never see those go in. By the way, a three just because you were going to let him shoot it. He just made big shot after big shot.
And I mentioned to his dad after the game, like, just the two best games I've seen Jaden play were this past summer in the River City final against Team Factory
he was
and
the
Chucky.
Man. He was the man. 20-plus
out of nowhere, hitting every shot. And Factory just had no answer this game. So state title of his senior year, like, he certainly picked the right times to play his best basketball. And that was ultimately the difference, because you look at a lot of guys kind of match up well. Like we talked about, Saint and Frankie, neither one kind of won that battle. Greg Brown stepped up. Jason Green stepped up, 18 apiece. Josiah hit some big plays, but ultimately Jaden Johnson, 24 points. That was the difference there. They just had nobody answer because, again, William Kyle, Tyler Sandoval kind of cancel each other out as well. So it really did come down to kind of that difference right there. And if Jaden doesn't make those shots, I really think Bellevue West wins this thing and may not even need a buzzer beater type of shot to win it. I think they probably have a couple possessions lead in the fourth quarter that they could hold on to.
When you look back at kind of the state tournaments in its totality, we know a lot about the guys, right? But when you look at kind of the accomplices that who helped pull it off, the Gannon Graggerts, or the Dane Peterson sometimes, who gets a little bit overlooked, or I really think about the little things. And Buckley is not an underappreciated guy for Creighton Prep, but he doesn't get a lot of the headlines. There's the Buckleys, the Majay Wileys who played well. I almost felt like A.J. Rollins should have had more touches. Boy, he was fantastic on Friday night and so efficient. Who are the guys that you kind of came away with where you're thinking, man, that's either who you thought they were or you wish they had another game in them to kind of build on that?
Yeah, that was the best game I think I've seen both Brendan. Brendan had a 37-point game against Elkhorn South last year where he just hit a crazy amount of threes. I didn't get to see that game, but this game was the best I've seen for both AJ and Brendan. So they left it all out that they went out on top. Man, AJ was an absolute monster.
He's a monster.
Running through everybody in his way.
How about his hands?
And it kind of translates to
football.
Yeah, football there where you think like he's got such good touch around the basket. And he's not a guy that a lot of time will great footwork.
Yeah, he's not going to Kevin McKill you or Kevin Garnett you, right?
He's just going up and putting the shot up. And he's got the touch to be able to finish over a contest time and time again. And he did that at a ridiculous level in that game. Finished with 22 on 10 of 15 shooting, 12 boards. They credit him with 2 blocks. I think he impacted like 5, 6, 7 shots at least around the rim. He was just absolutely phenomenal. And looked like a guy who wasn't ready to start focusing solely on football. He wanted his basketball career to continue.
You haven't done this quite as long as I have, so maybe your Rolodex will be a little shorter. But when is the last time you've seen a player like Chucky Hepburn be as dominant or able to dictate outcomes of games without having to score the basketball?
Yeah, nobody.
It's almost unprecedented, right?
Yeah, he's the most complete player that I've seen. I was talking to Sarah. This was my 9th season covering high school basketball, and we've seen some pretty good players. We've seen Teddy Allen come through Nebraska. We've seen Kyrie Thomas at the high school level, kind of
Justin
my first
Patton.
year.
You've seen a ton.
Yeah, but Sharif Mitchell, obviously. But nobody Chucky is as good defensively, as good of a passer as anybody I've seen. And then on top of that, he can go get a bucket when he needs to. And he's not a great three-point shooter, but it seems like fourth quarter. I've never seen a guy who shoots closer to 30% overall shoot such a high percentage in the clutch.
When it matters the most. Hey, I was going to say, he could be 1 of 7 behind the arc. If you need 3 threes, he's going to make 3 threes.
It feels like more than half his made threes have come in fourth quarters of games this season.
I think crazy. He had 19 of the 20.
He had 5 in the fourth quarter against Prep. That's insane.
It's just,
and they needed every single one of them.
When you look back, you feel bad for guys like Justin City, who I felt like, wow, you make those free throws. He had the layup at the end of the game in the first overtime game against Bellevue West 2 that didn't go in as well. When you look back and you watch that team as they rallied, Josh plays a lot of seniors. He's kind of really developed that program where you kind of step in and develop. Who do you think they missed the most going into next year?
I think it's definitely City.
All right. Just because he has the most versatility.
Yeah, and for that point guard spot, they've got some guys they like, some younger guys, but I don't know that there's anybody. You saw in the game there when Justin got in that foul trouble.
Oh, yeah,
and
it
had
mattered.
To sit, and that was when they hit him with a big run, and he had to put him back in there and picked up his third.
He's so disruptive defensively.
And just handling the ball and making better. And even he had a couple of turnovers early that were unfortunate, but just his ability to handle the ball and make the right decisions. They had to put the ball in the hands of some other guys that weren't quite ready for the moment at that point. And so I think Martell Evans is a guy that they've kind of developed throughout this year coming off that bench as kind of a backup point guard type. We'll see if he can step in there. Obviously, they've got Luke Junkers coming back as your kind of inside-out presence, kind of replace some of what Rollins does.
He's interesting, right? Like, I kind of put a lot of pressure on him Friday during our morning show where I said if he could answer the dinner bell as a two-way guy and give them some toughness and presence, I felt like that would be the difference. And I think he's still evolving into that kind of role.
Yeah, and I think that game will be a big learning point for him because they really took it at him a couple of times, forced some turnovers in key moments. I think this one's going to stick with him for a while throughout this offseason as he comes back next year as kind of the senior leader on this team. He was a leading scorer this year. And so he's going to have to step up. You look at that class, he's one of the few guys with Division I offers right now, and he's got the profile to really make a leap and earn more of those with a good summer. So he's a guy that's going to have to take that big step forward, and he's got the tools to do it.
Now, maybe you didn't allow yourself to go here, but I heard a lot of this lamenting about kind of this nostalgic look at the level of play and where this year ranks. And I was a little taken aback because I'm thinking to myself, now, wait a minute. For 3/4 of this season, we talked a lot about it being top-heavy. We heard criticisms of Hunter not playing like a 5-star. Chucky didn't shoot it very well. And there wasn't like this fanfare. How did you reconcile the weekend versus where having the rare 5-star and arguably the best player in a school's history in Chucky Hepburn, how did you kind of compartmentalize this whole year when you take a look back at it?
And I think by the tail end of the season, you and I at least had really started to include Prep in that conversation.
Oh, yeah,
at the
for
top.
sure. For sure. And they were my dark horse when the season started.
And I think the state tournament, as well as Millard West played, kind of demonstrated how much of a gap there was between those top three and the rest of the class and the level that those three were able to reach. And credit to, I think, it was a great decision by Josh Ludke to invest in the strength and conditioning part of it this summer. You could see the difference in
athleticism.
Those guys. Yeah. And they did a lot of training with
I think it was first pick.
Yeah.
Grant Eberle is fantastic at what he does.
And it was a huge difference there. Look at the Buckleys and the Wileys and the Cities they were good athletes, but I didn't think they were anything necessarily special. You look at some of the plays they were making this last week on the biggest stage athletically. I think that's why they were able to make the leap from good team last year to top three. Because they didn't have a Chucky or Hunter, yet they were still able to get into that mix because they were so solid 1 through 7, however many they wanted to play. And they had so many different guys that could make a difference. And a lot of that was, I think, the step up they made athletically with that training. So credit to him. That was a great decision, and to those guys for the work they put in. And again, I've been doing this 9 years. That's the strongest it's ever been at the top for me in terms of having 3 teams like that. Obviously, we've had some great teams, Omaha South and Omaha Central, obviously. But I don't think they had 2 other teams that pushed them as much as Prep and WS and Millard North pushed each other this year. And all their games kind of played that out. They were phenomenal games every single time.
Of the teams, we'll stick with B and A here for a second. Of the teams that have to reload and kind of rebuild, obviously Elkhorn, it was a senior-laden bunch, a very veteran crew. They may be the obvious answer. I don't know, Prep has some retooling they've got to do. It's difficult, near impossible to replace a guy like Chucky Hepburn. Millard North will lose 4 of 5 starters with Sandoval, St. Thomas, Hunter Salas, and Jaden Johnson. Who do you think has the ability to kind of bounce back? I mean, some programs will look vastly different in another 8-9 months.
It'll be interesting to see what Bellevue West looks like next year with Josiah Doser sliding back over more to that point guard role, because that's kind of what he played as coming up through the ranks through grade
basically
school.
His whole life.
Yeah, and he was a really good passer. I loved his vision and some of the stuff that he showed from that.
He had a very nice little leave at the hoop the other last night or Saturday night as well.
But playing next to Chucky and playing at WS, he's kind of morphed more into that scorer, that the catch and shoot guy, and now this year more of the ability to go make plays off the bounce in transition, and he's developed so much physically. It'll be interesting to see what that team looks like with him kind of sliding more into that number one primary initiator role as opposed to being the kind of sidekick to Chucky. And you've got William Kyle coming back. They've got some wings there coming off the bench with Stuvie and Evan Inselman and guys that have played a lot of basketball. Yeah, young guy, really good shooter. So they've got a lot. Also, prep, you got Casey O'Malley coming off the bench that made a big impact this year. You've got Jungers. You've got Martell Evans, like I mentioned, and their JV is always tough, so they're going to have some guys kind of step up there. And Millard North, you've got those freshmen. We'll see. Their freshman class was spectacular. We'll see how quickly those guys can be ready to do something at the varsity level, because you've got one of the best players in the state coming back in Jason Green. You've got those guards, Nick Dolezal and David Harmon played some this year.
Right. So it's basically it's Neil Mosser, it's Isaiah McMorris,
Eli
Gaith.
Yeah.
It'll be guys like that. And the funny thing is that's a great kind of little way to encompass this whole deal. When you look at all the young talent that played, the Wilcoxons, the Pokorskis, the Will Coopers, the Bennings, the Mitchells, the Mossers, Jaden Jackson, so many freshmen played meaningful minutes. What did you kind of attribute that to, as it was such a talented, senior-laden group throughout the majority of the Metro?
I think it points to the strength of that class, that 2024 class, and obviously you've got to watch these guys for a long time. You've seen the battles.
Yeah, Maverick Binder, who's fantastic. Marcus Glock at Wahoo. There's a lot of really good players.
And you've seen the
Aiden
battles.
Zickman at Central City.
Yeah, with OSA and TNE and Lincoln Supreme, all these guys, the battles.
Ricky Lofton at South.
And Factory, like all these guys all played really great battles throughout middle school, high-level basketball against each other. So I think they were pretty well prepared once they got to the varsity level to get out there and contribute to a lot of these teams. And you mentioned even some of these are more than contributing. Pokorski was Gretna's leading scorer this year and did it really efficiently for a team that doesn't score a lot of points. So that was really impressive. And so it's going to be fun to watch this class develop over the next 4 years or 3 years, because this 2021 class was so special. Yep. And you just look at the point guard position in this class alone and seeing guys, Chucky Hepburn, Brady Tim, Lucas Vogt, Carter Glenn, seeing all these guys that I've watched for 4 years here kind of all end their careers.
You're right. That's a fantastic group.
Yeah.
Jaden Johnson.
Yeah. And Jaden coming back over from Council Bluffs to kind of join that group a little later on. There were just so many really good point guards in this class, and I could go on and on. City, we mentioned, going to go to Morningside and have a really good career there. There's just so many really
D'Angelo
good point guards. Yeah.
At Millard West.
Yeah,
let me ask you this before we go. You said 9 years. Where have you seen the facilities and training go? Where if Caleb wants to go play on a Monday night and go shoot, he can. If he wants to go on a Sunday morning and shoot, where have you seen the opportunities and the facilities change the most in just 9 short years?
Well, and I think that's a huge part in the talent and the level of basketball we're getting is the training, the summer basketball, all these options that these kids have now. There's so many people that kids can go to work. Everybody's got their own. Some of these kids work with multiple trainers because they all bring something a little different. I know Thomas Villanco is a good friend. Like I know he's doing great work.
Yeah,
down there in Lincoln.
He does really quietly. He does really, really good work. I wonder what would happen if a guy like that just shows up in Omaha. Right, to go along with all the other high-level training that's here. You've got the guys out at Factory that train, Coach Foster and Mackey, and what Bob Francis does at UBT, what Cody Levinson and Coach Barnes do at Going Vertical. It is so competitive. And the guys like their guys. I mean, a lot of it's fascinating to watch.
And that's the best part, too, and that's where the competition is driving – more opportunities for everybody else. Where
you got Hoffman Hoops that's tucked right there at Gretna. It's like
again another like we could just go on. There's so many guys that are out there that know their stuff that are working, helping kids get better. And you look at OSA, what they've done with the field house and then open up their own new facility.
And then their training academy.
And that's driven Lincoln Supreme to get the Kinetic facility down there in Lincoln up. So now they've got that. Kids have that place to go down in Lincoln. So now you've got so many different competing opportunities for kids where if you want to get better, you can. That's where we're at right now as a basketball community is now. Kids, you can go be as good as you want to because there's so many different opportunities for kids to improve.
Yeah, and I guess I'd close with this. I thought that was the difference, right? Whether I'm talking about Brady Tim or Caden Glenn or Hunter Salas or Chucky Hepburn or Frankie Fiddler, City, Buckley, all these talented guys that the Gannon Graggerts, the Drew Christos that love to compete. They work at their game. It's not just enough for those guys to be talented. There's this competitiveness that was really, really refreshing to see. I mean, Hayden Glenn just gave you the appearance that he was going to find a way to win. Yeah. Didn't matter what it looked like. I mean, the Binders, like they grind, right? As good as they are in the community of Auburn, they grind at their craft.
And it was so interesting to see Cam Binder's evolution as a player. Yeah. Coming in freshman year, obviously scoring, and then sophomore year, 20 a game, taking every shot, hitting so many big clutch shots at the state tournament. That's kind of really when his legend started. Excuse me. And then last year, you had Lambert emerge as a dominant post force. He kind of took a step back, started playing more point guard, dropped down to about 15 a game. Lambert, I believe, led them in scoring. And then this year, didn't necessarily have Lambert anymore, but he still kind of stepped back even more.
Yeah, sure.
And so Ryan and Maverick, and then Daniel Ferreri stepped up more. So he averaged, I think, his fewest points maybe since his freshman year. I forgot what he averaged as freshman. He did not take a shot. He didn't even look to shoot the ball in the state title game. He scored 4 points on 4 bonus free throws. And that's it. And he didn't score until the 2:20 mark of the fourth quarter.
That's what's going to be.
He was fine with that.
Yeah, that's what's going to be interesting to watch at a team like Platteview, right? Yeah. Who was a little young, a little green, led by a sophomore. As the evolution of a guy like Connor Milliken as a facilitator, as some other guys have kind of, I think he trusts a lot more with Coach Brodsky out there. Teams like that will be fun to watch because you wonder what the next phase is as guys diversify their game because they want to win.
Yep. And for guys that make such big leaps so early on, it's like, okay, where's he going next?
What's next?
What does the next step look like? Because Connor, I mean, you'd be hard-pressed to find a more
polished
productive
player. Yeah.
Well, and not even just offense, just productive player with his rebounds, the blocks, the steals, all that stuff he did in addition to scoring the ball. Like, you'd have a hard time. Like, you look at PR in high school level, like, he's got to – you'd be hard-pressed to find someone that was more productive than Connor this year. And he did it as a sophomore. So where does he go?
Another gym rat.
Yeah.
A guy that stays working on his craft. It helps when you only live 5 minutes from the school and – you know, your coach is kind of your quasi neighbor too, so it's just like, hey, you need to go get some shots up. But man, fantastic season, and the finale did not disappoint. I don't have any idea what it'll be next. Right? We hear our music, it makes me a little sad. Next Monday, I'll be looking for somebody to talk to. We'll make up something.
Yeah, thanks for everybody that listened along this season. We picked up a lot of viewers down the stretch because we knew you guys absolutely love this stuff. It's been a pleasure to break it down for you all season long. Going back to football, I'm glad that you brought me on board for this. It's been so much fun this year. So thank you, DB.
Thank you. Always good. We will tap the Rolodex, the tank, the group think. We'll see what happens. Stay right there, though. We'll let you know what's next with Nebraska Preps postgame. I just have a feeling wherever I am, we'll see this guy next to me. I enjoy working with him. That's Jacob Padilla. I'm old DB. Appreciate you tuning in.
A Hurrdat Media Production.